Video shows you how to write a linear equation when you're given a table. The first thing we do is we find the slope. I'm going to color code the change in y and the change in x. And I'm going to look at these first 2 points. The change in y from -2 to 3 is +5. We increased by 5. Now let's look over at the changes in x, and we're only concerned right now with these first 2 points, 2, -2, and 3, 3. From the x value 2 to the x value 3, we increased by 1, so the change in x is 1. Slope is equal to change in y over change in x, so the slope is equal to 5. Once you have a slope of 5, you can use the table to figure out the y-intercept. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go back to where x equals 0, because where x equals 0, we have the y-intercept. So 2 back to 1, we subtracted 1. When we're going forwards, you'll notice we added 1, so when we're going the opposite way, we're going to subtract. It's the same with the y's. Going forward, we add 5, so going backwards, we subtract 5. So 2 minus 1, we get to 1. -2 minus 5, we're at -7. We're going to do the same thing again. I subtract 1 in x, and I subtract 5 in y. So I get to 0 in x, and I get to -12 in y. So 0, -12 is the y-intercept. And the y-intercept tells us what b is. The y of the y-intercept is b. So we know that b is equal to -12. So now what we need to do is we need to write out y equals mx plus b and go ahead and fill in the information that we know. We know that m is 5, our slope is 5, and we know that b, the y-intercept, is -12. So I go ahead and fill that in, and we just wrote the equation for this table. Another method you could use for finding b is you could write out y equals mx plus b. You could plug in your slope, and then you could also choose one point from the table. So I'm going to choose the point 4, 8 from the table. And the x value, 4, goes in for the x. And then the y value, 8, replaces the y. So we're crisscrossing. That's what we said in class, just so we didn't make a mistake at this point. 5 times 4, you get 20. To get b alone, you subtract 20 from each side using inverse operations to cancel out the 20 on the right side. We're left with b equals -12, which is the same thing that you find using the table. So we found the same thing up here. So number 1, you should have gotten y equals 5x minus 12. All right, number 2. Number 2, we do the same thing. M is equal to the change in y over the change in x. So the change in y is -1/2. We subtract 1/2. And the change in x between these 2 points is a +1. You increase by 1 in the x value section. -1/2 divided by 1 is -1/2. So the slope is -1/2. And then we're going to use the table to figure out the y-intercept. We're just going to continue the table. So I'm going to go back to 0 by subtracting 1. If you're going forwards, you add 1. And we're going to do the opposite for the change in y because we're going backwards. We're going to add 1/2, and we're going to get back to 1. So 0, 1 is the y-intercept. b is the y of the y-intercept. So b is equal to 1. And the final step is to just fill in slope-intercept form. So m we found out was -1/2. We found that out right here. And then b was a +1. You always leave y and x alone at the end. You shouldn't put a number in for y or for b. Or x, sorry. Let's also use the other method for solving for the y-intercept. So we're going to write out y equals mx plus b. and we're going to plug in -1/2 for m. And then we're going to go up to our table and choose one point. So I'm going to choose the point 2, 0. So 2, 0. X is 2, so we're going to plug that in for x. And y is 0, so we're going to plug that in for y. 0 is y. And then we're going to multiply. -1/2 times 2 is equal to -1. To get b alone, you add 1 to each side, and we get b equals 1, which is the same thing that we found before. We found that b is equal to 1. So for number 2, you should have -1/2 x plus 1. All right, number 3. Again, we start by finding the slope. So slope is change in y over change in x. Between the first 2 points, and you can really choose any 2 points, the change in y is 1. And now let's look at the change in x. From 4 to 5, we also add 1. So the slope is 1. Once you have the slope, you can continue the table to find the y-intercept. So let's go from 4 back to 3, and we subtract 1 to do that. From 8, we go back to 7, and you subtract 1. It's the opposite of going forwards. Then I'm going to go back to 2, and I go back to 6, because again, from each side we're subtracting 1. Then we go back to, and I'm going to continue this over here, we go back to 1, and then we go back to 5, then we go back to 0 and x, and we go back to 4. So 0, 4 is the y-intercept. These were the x's, these were the y's. And just picture this over here on top. I just couldn't fit it up there on the screen. So 0, 4 is the y-intercept, which means that b equals 4. So we're going to fill in our equation, y equals mx plus b. You can always write down y equals x plus some number, and then you can fill in, instead of m, we put in 1. So we replaced m with 1. And then instead of b, you plug in 4. So your equation is y equals 1x plus 4. Again, I'm going to show the other method. Y equals mx plus b. M was equal to 1. And then I need to plug in an xy point as well to solve for b. So I'm going to choose the point 8, 12 this time. So 8, 12. 8 is the x value, so we replace x with 8. So x is being replaced with 8. And then the y value is 12, so instead of y, we plug in 12. 1 times 8 is 8. To get b alone, you subtract 8 from each side. 8 minus 8 equals 0, so we're left with just b on the right side, and on the left side, we're left with 4, which is what we found by continuing the table, that b equals 4. All right, table 4, you should notice that this is a special equation. All of the y values are 7. So simply all you do is write y equals 7, and you're finished. The memory device for this is Hoy, and the 0 in the center stands for a slope of 0, and you'll see that the change in y is 0, the change in x is plus 1, change in y over change in x would be 0 over 1, which is a slope of 0, which goes nicely with Hoy. So it's going to be this horizontal line at 7. All right, number 5 is also a special equation, and you'll notice that x always equals -2, so the equation is simply x equals -2. And this goes with the memory device Ver-Nox. The NO stands for no slope. The VER stands for a vertical line. We'll have a vertical line at -2. So this is -2 right here. And the slope you'll see from 8 to 10, we have a change of 2 and a change in x of 0. So change in y would be 2, change in x would be 0, and you can't divide by 0, so there is no slope. We also call this undefined.